Hello and welcome to another episode of the Startup Operator Roundup. I'm Roshan Karyappa.
And I'm Gunjan Saha, and together we'll break down the biggest headlines from India's startup ecosystem.
Before we begin, yesterday there was a terrible train tragedy in Odisha of the sort that we haven't perhaps witnessed in 20 or 30 years. Over 250 people have been declared dead at this point of time. The death toll may rise, and several hundred are injured as well. These three trains collided, and it's really catastrophic. Our thoughts and prayers with the families and friends who've been affected. Hope that they can find the strength to move on from this loss.
So, a couple of interesting topics we have to cover in this episode of the Roundup. First, of course, Swiggy has achieved unit level profitability, so we'll try to decode how they achieved that. Foxconn also recently announced that they will be manufacturing iPhones in Bangalore as soon as April 2024. Along with that, we'll also discuss the Tata Group's recent 13,000 crore deal with the Gujarat government to set up a battery manufacturing plant. And furthermore, we'll also break down BlackRock's recent decision to cut Baidu's valuation by 62%.
Significant.
Yeah, so a lot of interesting news to discuss. Stay tuned. Roshan, last week Rahul Yadav was back in the news again.
There's a name that I thought I had not heard for a while, but those of us from 2013, 2014 perhaps remember the whole Housingcom Saga. Rahul Yadav was one of the founders, and he had this major showdown with Shailendra Singh of Sequoia. And those days seem, like a distant memory, really. Rahul since started up another company called Intelligent Interfaces that did everything from AR, VR to, optimizing government efficiency of all things, right? So on and so forth. At least claimed to do all of that, and he shut that down in perhaps less than a year or something. And this whole 4B network was his third, startup, right? And it was problematic to begin with. I mean, their business model, many said, was not sustainable. I mean, they were offering huge incentives to these brokers, and it was fraught with all of these risks. But InfoEdge is a, very experienced investor, right? I mean, of course, Naukri is a legendary company. They've invested in Zomato, Policy Bazaar, and so on, right? But yeah, I mean, there have been some allegations right now that of the 280 crore that was raised from InfoEdge, a lot of that money was being siphoned off for personal use. Employees not being paid, vendors not being paid, all kinds of made up invoices and so on and so forth. Allegations, terrible allegations being made about this. And man, I mean, I really hope that we can all collectively move on from this nonsense. There is fairly comprehensive piece on Inc. 42. They've covered the entire saga. You guys can check it out. But I really hope that we can focus on building, on innovation rather than stuff like this, right? So, yeah.
Well, talking on building on innovation, Swiggy's food delivery business has become profitable as of March 2023. And this is impressive because they did it in less than 9 years. And I think with this development, Swiggy becomes one of those handful food delivery platforms around the world that have achieved, unit profitability. And not only the food business, even the Instamart, right, which is a quick commerce business, they're also doing pretty well. And as per media reports, they are in line to achieve profitability in the next 3 years. Couple of roundups back, we did discuss Zomato has achieved EBITDA level profitability, and right now Swiggy seems to have covered the gap. So, do you think that means an IPO is like on the cards for them?
I don't know about an IPO, but look what the market has forced people to do, right? I mean, it's forced people to focus on profitability, on running a sustainable business. Now, I haven't really investigated the numbers, so I don't know what kind of profitability they're talking about, right? Whether it's EBITDA or some other kind of fancy accounting jargon that I'm not aware of. But it's a very, very difficult business, I mean, we've told you often times that the margins are extremely thin. And so, I mean, Swiggy has to increase the order value, has to launch some premium services, and has to take a significant cut from this order value, because that is key, right? Because Indian consumers hate paying for delivery. They will pay a premium for a service, and Swiggy has to figure that, right? Now, with the rumors of Dunzo not doing well and potentially, scaling down, Swiggy is kind of acutely positioned to capture that market, right, with Instamart and whatnot. So these are interesting times for sure, right? If you look at companies globally also, whether it is DoorDash and Uber Eats and the likes, they've not all had a very easy time in this business, because fundamentally it's a very difficult business, right? It's essentially a logistics business, but yeah, because of the challenges mentioned, it's really, really tough. So yeah, kudos to the Swiggy team. They've had a couple of exits as well. I mean, the Swiggy Genie, head of Genie, I think, quit as well, and then their CTO has quit. Right, so perhaps, I mean, there'll be a new management in place right now, and they're preparing for the next leg of the journey, which could potentially include an IPO at some point. Who knows? Yeah.
All right, so Foxconn, which is one of Apple's key device manufacturer, last week they announced that they will start manufacturing iPhones from Bangalore by the as soon as April 2024, and they've already made a payment to acquire the land, and I think proceedings have already started. And this factory will be set up near Devanahalli, and the state government will hand over the required land for this by 1st of July. And according to some estimates, this 13,600 crore rupees project is expected to create around 50,000 jobs in the region.
Amazing. This is truly fantastic news. India makes, I think, 15% of the iPhones today, right? And there are all kinds of statements being made that, we assemble these phones and we don't do any core engineering or R&D and so on. But look, guys, I mean, building an ecosystem, I mean, you'll have to start from the scraps, right? I mean, you'll have to start with whatever possible and then scale it from there. So once this plant comes up, and, once we start developing an ecosystem, this will also signal to other, multinationals that, India is a viable candidate for this. Anyway, most of these folks are considering a China plus one sort of a policy, right? And they're exploring actively Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and so on, right? So yeah, I mean, we need to have these success stories, whether it is Foxconn or some of the others, to inspire confidence in global investors.
But let's zoom out a bit, right? And we have seen how over the past few years, the way the government has invested in not only attracting these companies but also providing the necessary infrastructure. For example, think about the Bangalore Chennai highway, which easily connects it to ports for export, or the road projects, right, which Nitin Gadkari has been spearheading, and we have seen how committed the government was towards its development. And for in the state government as well, the Minister for Large and Medium Industries, Mr. M.B. Patil, he said that he's working closely with the Apple team to understand what is the sort of skills requirement that the factory would need, so that his team can set up, the required training facilities. I think this proactiveness really boosts the confidence for these manufacturers, and that's what makes it lucrative for them to come here.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there have been many, many policy tailwinds, right? I mean, whether it is PLI, whether it is Make in India, or the other initiatives as such, right? And you bring up an important point, right? I mean, I think there should be some sort of competitive federalism in that sense, right? Telangana has been very active in wooing investors, for instance, right? Similarly, Maharashtra, similarly Gujarat, and Tamil Nadu has been fairly successful also, right? I mean, these states should really vie for investors, and really hope that, we have that active competitive spirit to attract these folks, right? To invest in an ecosystem here, to provide jobs, to bring in money, because India will require all of this, right? All of this on the path to the 5 trillion economy, right? So yeah, this is great stuff.
Also, on similar lines, the Tata Group has signed a deal to build a lithium-ion factory in Sanand, Gujarat, and they're investing close to $1.58 billion or 13,000 crore rupees. Right, and this factory is not only like to serve the export market, but also for its own internal Jaguar Land Rover's electrification plan. They've announced that they'll invest 15 billion pounds or $19 billion over the next 5 years to reposition itself as electric first and a modern car maker. This new plant in Sanand will have an initial manufacturing capacity of 20 gigawatt hours, which could be doubled in the second phase of expansion. So we're seeing that India is not only building capacity to serve its domestic markets, but I think with this move is also positioning itself as an exporter.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it's fantastic that a company like Tata is investing so heavily in EV, right? I mean, this will make the others also want to take this seriously. And I think indeed a lot of these folks are doing that, right? I mean, Tata has, of course, the best-selling EV car in the market right now, Nexon. This is fantastic. I think last roundup or the roundup before, we spoke about Tesla coming to India and then Tata investing in EVs. So yeah, fabulous stuff. I mean, this should build up the ecosystem, I would say.
Yes, you're right. But again, this does not come without its challenges, right? Because the government is cracking down hard on companies who are violating the subsidy norm that the government has put in place. And last week, I think government has issued notice to four more companies. And the case against them is that they are not adhering to the whole localization criteria, which is like the whole making it, like manufactured in India, assembled in India. They have also questioned these companies regarding the potential deregistration from the FAME scheme, right? So the government is not shying away from taking any sort of action, but don't you think like end of the day it will again be the consumers who will have to pay the price somehow?
You're right, but then I mean, it is. I mean, it's something that the government has to do, right? I mean, if someone is taking advantage of a particular, when I say take advantage, I mean take unfair advantage of a particular rule or a subsidy or something of that sort. I mean, they do have to audit that and give more power to the good guys, basically, right? These FAME subsidies, obviously, they cause the electric vehicle to be 20-30% cheaper, especially these two-wheelers and so on, right? I mean, and this money is like sort of trickle down, I mean, down to the distributor and whatnot, right? So there is plenty of scope for misuse, and indeed there has been some of these cases as well. But I hope they do take strict action, right? I mean, because I mean these subsidies are, I mean, they're meant to sort of improve the whole ecosystem as such, right? Which means that develop indigenously and so on. I mean, it is what it is, and if someone tries to break the rule, they're gonna screw them anyway, right? So yeah.
All right, so looks like we have Baiju's in the news again. BlackRock, which is perhaps the world's largest asset manager, they've written down shares of Baiju's in its book, and since October last year, they have reduced the edtech's valuation by over 62% from a peak value of $22 billion. And it's not only this valuation cuts, but I think Baiju's has found itself in a soup in the US amidst a lot of lawsuits for defaulting on repayments for term loans for the amount of 1.2 billion. Then there's a case accusing them of hiding $500 million from the loan amount. So a lot's happening, but at the same time, the company is in the market trying to raise $700 million in equity. And in the same round, some existing investors also saying that they are willing to sell their shares at a discount to its $22 billion valuation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know again how many people really thought that Byju's was worth $22 billion. I mean, the funniest comment I saw was on Twitter. Someone said Byju's is becoming a unicorn in reverse. I mean, uh, you're going to see these markdowns, obviously. I don't know what people were smoking in 2021. Some quality shit, man. I mean, like, seriously, $22 billion. We covered Byju's almost every
week
other
we
roundup.
acquisition or
Yeah.
fundraise.
So 12 acquisitions and so on, right? And I kept looking at this and wondering, see, edtech is one place where you cannot corner the entire supply or the demand, right? I mean, all it takes is for one teacher to say, you know what, all right, I'm going to do my own thing, right? And gather a bunch of 50, 100,000 students, right? And technology has made that just easier. And, we were all told that, they're consolidating the supply, consolidating the demand, but it doesn't work like that, And 2022, 23, I mean, hard realities have come to bear. And obviously, the investors have taken a good hard look and are doing what is necessary, I suppose, right? And it's unfortunate because, see, edtech is, again, such a unit profitable business, I mean, literally, you have crazy margins and everything. All of that was driven down by some mindless spending on advertising and customer acquisition and sponsoring, FIFA and whatnot, right? But I hope that they're able to recover from all of this stuff and find the money to operate a good, sustainable business, I think.
Yeah, but times can turn because few days back I remember reading an article of the proposed reforms in the education system for board exams, right? I think they're restructuring the entire program and restructuring like how the exams will be conducted and all. Who knows? I mean, they might just like manage a way to pivot successfully or like adopt a newer model.
Yeah, maybe.
But I mean, for sure, it won't be that tech company which started in 2019, 2020.
Yeah, maybe they'll buy UGC. Right? I don't know. I mean, well, okay. Lesser said about Byju's, the better, I suppose. Let's move on.
All right, let's talk about some of the fundraisers from last week. Consumer appliances brand Atomberg Technologies has raised $86 million from Temasek, Steadview, Trifecta, and others. A couple of weeks back, we even had the chief business officer of Atomberg in the podcast. Space startup Pixel has raised $36 million in funding and even found a new investor in Google. Then Capillary Technologies, which is an Indian SaaS startup offering solutions for loyalty management and customer engagement, has reached $45 million in a funding round. Now, if you notice, Roshan, like over the past 2 weeks, we have been discussing these large check sizes. So it feels like the tides are slowly changing.
Yeah, I think so. And these three companies are amazing, right? I mean, let's start with Capillary. They've been in the market since 15 years, 15, 16 years, I think, right? 2007, 2008. I remember hiring the first few engineers for Capillary way back in 2008 or 2009, right?
You hired capillary engineers.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the recruitment space at that time. So we coordinated a few recruitment drives and whatnot, right? And Capillary is an old hand at this, and they've had really rough times. 2020 hit them very hard because most of their business was retail focused, and since retail came to a grinding halt, they had a terrible time. They had to lay off, plenty of people around that time. And kudos to them that they've tried to bounce back. I think one of the founders, one or more of the founders have quit. Anish, who is the founder and was a CEO earlier, has taken a MD role right now, and there's another professional CEO at the helm. So it takes a lot of faith and toil to build a successful business, and Capillary is kind of demonstrating that. I'm really, really happy that they've kind of bounced back from a couple of years ago, when those things happened. So yeah, let's hope that they go on further, and perhaps we'll see another SaaS IPO at some point of time, right? Pixel is a fantastic space tech startup. We've spoken plenty about them earlier. In fact, I'm trying to get the founder Aves on the podcast sometime. Aves, if you're listening, we'd love to host you. There's really a ton of questions that I'd love to ask him. But yeah, again, fantastic team. They've been doing some interesting work. And Arindam is my favorite marketer, man. Arindam of Attenberg. Arindam is the chief business officer, and we hosted him perhaps 4 weeks or 5 weeks back on the podcast. And he's just a fantastic guy. Talks pure danda, right? Strips away all of the vanity and all of the buzzwords and whatnot, right? And in fact, we'll talk more about him during the Talk of the Town segment. But yeah, Attenberg has been doing fantastically well. They're clocking about 100 crores a month, and they've pioneered these whole BLDC fans, which are now the standard, right? And think about who they compete with, right? They compete with Crompton and Havells and all of these folks who do thousands of crores of revenue anyway, right? So yeah, fantastic set of companies to have raised funds this week. Yeah.
Talking about Arindam, right? For Talk of the Town section, he has put out this tweet on top of the funnel ads. He writes, top of funnel ads awareness campaigns should be more brand led or emotional and not talk much about the product or product USP. He says that this is one of the most common bullshit that you will hear, and many founders fall for it. And here's a thread on why it's wrong.
Yeah, it's an interesting thread. I highly recommend that you follow Arindam and also go through the thread. He makes an interesting point, right? Because, a lot of this brand advertising gyan that, you have to connect viscerally and all of that, well, some of it is true. He makes a very compelling point, which is that whether it is, the Daag Achhe Hai campaigns or, Fog Chal Raha Hai and whatnot, right? These are brands that had stayed in the market for a while, had built a category for themselves, and then could afford to, say that because they already had recall to an extent, right? So yeah, you shouldn't shy away from saying cheaper, faster, better, or some version of that in your top of the funnel ads as well, right? So yeah, for all the marketers or growth nerds out there, definitely follow Arindam. A lot of very practical advice from him. Yeah, we'll perhaps have him on the podcast again and do another masterclass, I suppose.
Yeah, we can definitely make that happen. But last week we put out the conversation with Sairam, right? And personally, I really enjoyed, hearing from him because his gyan was so practical, right? So I think
a lot of people reached out to me actually after that episode with similar feelings, right? That all of the gyan was very practical, and they really enjoyed, Sai speak.
Yeah. And this week, I think we're putting out the episode with GD Prasad of VS Money. Can you tell us a bit about that conversation?
So VS Money, for folks who come to our studio, they know that we serve the VS Money coffee and the snacks. They're fabulous. We're big fans of the brand, and I happen to invite GD Prasad on Twitter, and we had an hour and a half conversation about everything, right? I mean, how did he start? What are the 101 of building and scaling a D2C brand? Plenty of these things, right? I think it's a great primer on how to get started, and what are the 10 things you will perhaps deal with as you take a product to market, right? Yeah, really nice conversation. All of these in-person conversations, right? I mean, they seem to have a very different flavor to them. I'm really liking them, So I can't wait for you guys to listen in and let us know who we should host. We'll definitely try to get them on the podcast.
That's right. Folks, keep sending us your feedback and your loves to the comment section, or reach out to us directly via Twitter or LinkedIn. Along with that, if you want these updates to be delivered straight into your WhatsApp inbox, you'll find a WhatsApp link on the description below. If you're listening to this on Spotify, you can send us a voice note as well. If you're still listening to this episode, thank you so much for staying with us right till the end. And yes, we'll be back again with more interesting headlines next week. So take care and have a great week ahead.
See you guys.